Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are jumping straight into the deep end of the historical and spiritual world of Sufism. We're going to explore a massive, centuries-old tradition that is entirely built around a profound path of love and spiritual presence. Whether you're already deeply familiar with mystical traditions, or you're just trying to figure out the philosophy behind some of the world's most beautiful poetry, you are in the right place. We're going to break down these huge metaphysical ideas into clear, actionable insights that actually make sense for our modern lives. Okay, let's dive right into this. Listen to the reed and the tale it tells, how it sings of separation. That is the opening line of a true spiritual masterpiece, the Mathnawi, and it absolutely sets the tone for the Sufi path of love. It's this intense feeling of longing. These words were dictated by Mawlana Jalal Rumi, and the core teaching here is that humanity experiences this deep, aching separation from the divine source. It's literally like a reed that's been cut away from its riverbed. Our whole spiritual journey, that is the song of our longing to return home. So, to really grasp this path, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The scholar and the vagabond. 2. What exactly is Sufism? 3. The unity of being. 4. The tyranny of the ego. And 5. Practices of daily presence. Let's start with part 1, the scholar and the vagabond, the transformation of Rumi. You see, before Rumi was this globally recognized poet of love, he went through an absolutely massive personal transformation. He was born back in 1207 in Balkh, which is in modern-day Afghanistan, and his family actually had to flee the invading Mongols when he was just a kid. They eventually settled in Konya, Turkey. Throughout his early adulthood, Rumi was this hardcore, dedicated academic. He studied in Aleppo and Damascus with some of the absolute greatest religious minds of his era. So by the time he was in his 30s, he was already an eminent professor of religion and a highly attained mystic. He was, by all accounts, a lion of knowledge. But then everything flips upside down at age 37, when he meets a spiritual vagabond named Shams of Tabriz. The sources describe this meeting as pure spiritual alchemy. Shams wasn't just some guy, he was a messenger from the source. He carried enlightenment. Now, the tradition tells us that a teacher like Shams can only deliver this kind of divine spark to someone who is either completely empty or someone who is, quote, too full. And Rumi? He was definitely too full. He was packed to the brim with academic knowledge and formal religion. Shams was burning and Rumi caught fire. It was this exact encounter that transformed him from a brilliant professor into an inspired poet, a great lover of humanity, and the guy who would eventually dictate that vast masterpiece, the Mathnawi. Moving right along to part 2, what exactly is Sufism? Defining the indefinable. Now, what's really interesting here is that to understand Rumi, we kind of have to reverse engineer his enlightenment to look at the tradition that shaped him. And to understand Sufism, we first have to look at its roots. The original essential meaning of the word Islam is submission. But our sources are very specific here. They define this submission as the harmonization of the individual self with the divine. So, we're not just talking about a cultural identity or some rigid list of rules. We're talking about bringing your personal, superficial, everyday self into a deep, resounding harmony with the source of life. So, building on that foundation, Sufism is an intentional, intensified expression of that universal state of submission. It is a highly dynamic, experiential approach to the divine. And the really crucial point I want you to take away from this is that Sufism is not some dusty relic of the past. It's a living, breathing tradition of enlightenment. It's a method that constantly updates and reformulates its essential truth so it can be actively lived in every single era, including ours right now. Which brings us to part 3, the unity of being, the core truth of the path. This right here is the central philosophical truth holding all Sufi teaching together. An early Sufi named Shibli hit the nail on the head when he said, "The Sufi sees nothing except God in the two worlds." The whole core method of this path is the development of love. And in this tradition, lovers are people who have been completely purified by that love. They are totally free of their own egotistical baggage. Because they are so entirely focused on the beloved, they don't claim any personal virtues for themselves. They see everything they have and everything they are as belonging entirely to the source. And what's actually mind-blowing is how perfectly this 13th century mystical theology maps onto our modern understanding of the world. The whole essence of the path is realizing that we are not separate from the divine. In fact, the sources argue our modern age is uniquely positioned to get this. Intellectually, the sciences are constantly showing us just how biologically and physically interconnected we all are. Emotionally, global communication has shrunk our world so much that we feel it every day. We are one. One people, one ecology, one universe, one being. The current of love is running through all of life, just behind the physical stuff we can see. So let's get into part 4, the tyranny of the ego, overcoming modern separation. Okay, so if we're all so interconnected, why do we constantly feel so alienated from each other? What's blocking us? Well, on one side of the ring, we have the enslaved ego. Without submitting to a higher reality, our real self becomes a slave to the false ego. It gets completely cut off from the heart, living in this constant state of internal conflict and chasing contradictory material desires. On the other side, we have the essential self. This is our deeper, true identity, which is naturally harmonized with the source. This essential self has capacities for awareness, creativity, and a literal cosmic love that goes way, way beyond the limits of our superficial personalities. The entire spiritual path is about burning away the illusions of that enslaved ego so we can uncover our true divine spark. And the tradition does not hold back when criticizing worldliness. The sources argue we are living in a culture that is intensely materialistic, isolating, and neurotically individualistic. We are practically drowning in anxiety because humanity today is suffering under the greatest tyranny of all, the tyranny of the ego. We might not be bowing down to stone statues anymore, but man, we worship a lot of false idols. And almost all of them are just different reflections of our own ego. This vanity, this obsession with our false selves, it literally causes us to turn our backs on reality. So how do we fix it? Part 5. Practices of daily presence, grounding theology in action. To escape the ego, we have to use daily practices of presence. We have to ground this really lofty theology into tangible, everyday action. Think about Rumi's world for a second. The average person back then had a remarkably high level of spiritual awareness built right into their daily routine. Regular ablutions, stopping to pray 5 times a day, fasting during daylight for an entire month. These were not just empty, going through the motions rituals. They were active, practical methods designed to short-circuit the compulsiveness of the false self. They were frameworks for the continual remembrance of God. They ensured you lived with deep personal intention, tremendous generosity, and actual integrity. These habits are literally the daily antidote to our ego-driven materialism. I absolutely love this quote from Abu Muhammad Muta'ayyish. He describes the ideal spiritual state like this. His thought keeps pace with his foot. His soul is where his body is. You know, when we think about being spiritual today, we often imagine spacing out, escaping the real world, or kind of absenting ourselves from reality to go be with God. But the Sufi approach to mindfulness is the exact opposite of that. True spiritual presence means your soul is right where your body is. You are 100% present in the current moment, present with yourself, and simultaneously present with God. Zero separation. At the end of the day, this entire path of love and intentional remembrance is a remedy for our modern amnesia. Because in our obsession with the material world and our own egos, we haven't just forgotten the divine, we've actually lost our own essential self. The two are completely tied together. Remembering God is the beginning of remembering ourselves. By cultivating this daily presence, we finally start to recover that lost divine spark. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. If forgetting the source of life ultimately means forgetting who we truly are, we really need to ask ourselves, what are we actually paying attention to? Are we letting our thoughts run miles ahead of our feet, totally enslaved by the anxieties of the ego? Or are we actively cultivating that cosmic love and presence right here, in the now? So I'm going to leave you with this to chew on. If forgetting God is forgetting ourselves, what will you remember today? Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through the core principles of Sufism. Keep seeking, keep learning, and I will catch you in the next explainer.